fine. It's a belief system. He's allowed to believe it, and people are allowed to vote for it. But if liberals deny it, like he's just going through a goth phase, they're going to lose more elections. This is not a communist country. It turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening. Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar.
It is finally happening. Bill Maher is clearly explaining why the Democratic Party's strategy keeps falling apart. Right now, during the ICE controversy, many people expected the DNC's image to improve. Instead, it is dropping quickly. Many people are asking why this is happening. Maher says he knows the real reason, and he believes it will truly surprise you. So press that subscribe button for honest, direct political commentary, and let us jump straight into the center of the issue.
Now, let me tell you about the story that liberal algorithms locked out. Her name is Sia Weaver, and if you ask anyone in the blue sky bubble who that is, they'll look at you like a turkey looking up at the rain. But she's kind of important in New York, being Major Mamdani's chief of the Office to Protect Tenants, and since Mamdani's big issue is the rent's too damn high, yes, he stole this guy's act. It's a very key appointment in the most important city in the country, which is also our financial center. It matters that the mayor stands by, and so I assume stands with, someone who says things like, if you don't believe in the government's sacred right to seize private property, it's over. Seize private property. Home ownership is racist. Elect more communists.
Maher begins the discussion by focusing on what he calls the DNC's uneasy shift toward far-left ideas. He says this is more than simple campaign talk, arguing that some voters hear the party's message as leaning toward socialism. Some people disagree and say that certain figures do not represent the whole Democratic Party, and that it is unfair to judge a national movement by one outspoken politician. But Maher believes those critics are missing the larger point. He explains that New York is not just another city testing bold policies. It is the financial center of the United States and a global symbol of American capitalism and economic strength. What happens there affects the entire country. If voters start believing that New York is moving towards socialism, Maher warns that this perception alone could spread outward, changing how the party is viewed across the nation.
Private property, especially home ownership, is a weapon of white supremacy. Really? Even among the 20 million black Americans who own their own home? I mean, these are the kind of utterances I might forgive as something a dumb white girl said while she was at Bryn Mawr. Because it's the kind of privilege hating you can only learn for $95,000 a year. But these are statements made as an adult. Yes. For co-eds from elite private colleges, you're only a lesbian until graduation, but the communism lasts a lifetime.
Maher continues by arguing that the Democratic strategy is collapsing for one simple but politically sensitive reason. Many Americans strongly react against anything that sounds like communism. He says the word itself can set off warning signals among voters. For many people, the term feels harsh and even threatening, connected to ideas of too much government control, weak economic growth, and reduced freedoms. Whether that view is fair or exaggerated, Maher says it is politically unwise to ignore it. He argues that Americans have historically defined themselves as opposing centralized economic control. Many generations grew up during the Cold War, when communism was presented as the main ideological enemy. So when political language sounds similar to those themes, even slightly, it creates concern. Maher says dismissing those worries as ignorance only increases division. In his view, if voters link democratic messaging to failed socialist systems of the past, the political damage will be unavoidable and self-caused.
Democrats seem to be having this debate whether or not Mayor Mamdani is a socialist or a democratic socialist. Let me settle it. He's a straight-up communist. How do I know this? Well, I'm reading between the lines when one of his major advisors says, elect more communists.
Maher argues that openly using socialist labels is harming the Democratic Party's broader image. In his view, it is not only about one politician's platform, it is about public perception. When a well-known leader supports policies that many people call socialist or communist, opponents quickly use that against the entire party. Maher believes this narrative can be politically expensive. What surprises him more, he explains, is that even many millennials are not automatically convinced. While younger voters are often described as more progressive, they are also practical about economic issues. They think about jobs, rising prices, business growth, and long-term opportunity. If policies seem too extreme or financially risky, support can fade quickly. Minsh's broader point is clear. Promoting figures like Mandani into major roles gives critics a chance to label the DNC as moving too far left. Once that label sticks, correcting the damage becomes a difficult challenge the party may struggle to overcome.
Fine, it's a belief system. He's allowed to believe it and people are allowed to vote for it. But if liberals deny it, like he's just going through a goth phase, they're going to lose more elections. This is not a communist country.
Maher's point is not just personal opinion. It has already become a topic in political media discussions. On Real Time, he described Zoran Mandani as a direct communist and warned that Democrats risk losing elections if they ignore how that label sounds to voters. He may have an argument. Although views on socialism have changed among Democrats, a Gallup poll shows that most Americans still prefer capitalism over socialism. Many Republicans also see socialism very negatively, meaning labels like communist or socialist still carry strong political impact. The United States is not Venezuela, and it is fair to say most voters do not want their country to experience similar economic instability or crisis. Maher argues that if Democratic leaders allow opponents to describe them as radical or extreme without responding, that branding could seriously hurt them, even in the 2028 elections.
Turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening. Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar.
Here, Maher points to Venezuela's economic collapse as a warning when discussing the possible risks of strong socialist-leaning policies. It was once one of Latin America's richest economies, but it later suffered a long and serious downturn. Today, Venezuela's total GDP is about $120 billion, which is only a small part of the United States economy, whose GDP is nearly $29 trillion, around 240 times larger. That sharp difference is important. The U.S. economy supports innovation, jobs, and global influence. While Venezuela has faced shrinking production, shortages, and major drops in living standards over the past decade, America's strength comes from democratic institutions, diverse markets, and a system that rewards productivity instead of central government control. Unlike Venezuela, where heavy state intervention helps cause a crisis, the United States has kept resilience and wide prosperity. Maher's point is that moving too far away from those principles can bring serious political and economic consequences.
Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet.
Maher says he is simply stating what he believes is true. In his opinion, figures like Manny, AOC, and Bernie Sanders do not match the traditional image of the Democratic Party. He suggests they work under the Democratic name while promoting a much more ideological agenda that does not always align with mainstream party values. Whether the DNC officially supports that direction is open to debate, but Maher hints at the party's silence often speaks louder than formal statements. He questions why party leaders have not pushed back more strongly when language shifts toward democratic socialism or major economic restructuring. Since some leaders began openly using socialist messaging, only a few well-known voices on the left have publicly challenged them. Maher argues that this lack of criticism strengthens the belief that the party is either comfortable with the shift or unwilling to confront it. In politics, perception can be just as powerful as actual policy.
I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts. and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism, much of it appropriate to soften the edges of capitalism. But the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more.
Maher then makes a more detailed point. He explains that American democracy already includes some features that can be called socialist, such as public schools, Social Security, Medicare, and infrastructure spending. These are government-run or government-funded programs created to serve the public good. In simple terms, the system already mixes market capitalism with limited social safety nets. His argument is not that every shared policy is harmful. Instead, he says there is a clear difference between balance and complete overhaul. According to Maher, pushing toward a fully socialist system could disrupt the economic engine that supports growth and innovation. He admits that socialism can sound attractive in theory, offering fairness, equality, and guaranteed services. On paper, it promises stability and shared success. However, he argues that real-world results are more complex. Incentives can change, bureaucracy can grow, and efficiency may drop. His warning is that major structural change can bring consequences that outweigh the promises.
We're petrified of COVID, masking 2-year-olds who never would have died from it and keeping schools closed for far too long. They're definitely afraid of their kids, who from time immemorial have always come up with bad ideas. They're kids. Thinking up stupid shit is what they do. But parents used to tell them, that's ridiculous. The world doesn't work that way. Not today's parents. They say, you're right, honey. Gender is just a social construct. Please, sometimes your mother and I forget which one of us has.
Maher returns to what he believes was the Democratic Party's earlier mistake, leaning too heavily into what critics call woke politics. He argues that strong cultural messaging, identity debates, and strict ideological standards pushed away many moderate voters in past elections. In his view, that gap helped cause losses the party is still trying to understand. What surprises him most, he says, is that instead of adjusting, some groups appear to be moving even further left. Maher suggests that doubling down, shifting from cultural progressivism to more openly socialist economic language could worsen the issue rather than expand support. Elections are won in the political center, he argues, not at the extremes. If the party misreads public opinion and treats past defeats as a sign to become more radical instead of more practical, it may repeat the same mistakes, only with greater consequences in future elections.
I don't know if we're still banning TikTok. That was before we changed the rule in America to Trump decides what's a law. But I know it wouldn't even be an issue if parents would sack up and tell their kids to get off the f***ing phone. Democrats are still afraid of the mean girls who police their far-out fringe. Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton had a perfect score on LGBTQ issues from the Human Rights Campaign. But when he said, I have 2 little girls, I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a male or formerly male athlete, his own campaign manager quit.
In the end, Maher's argument comes down to one main warning: perception matters, and political branding can determine a party's success or failure. He believes the Democratic Party is getting close to labels and ideas that make many Americans uneasy. Whether it involves strong progressive cultural views, the rise of outspoken democratic socialists, or hesitation to clearly distance the party from communist language, Maher sees a pattern that may become costly. His larger concern is not about rejecting reform or ignoring inequality. It is about political reality. The United States has long balanced limited social programs with a strong capitalist foundation. When voters feel that balance shifting too far, they respond. If the DNC does not recognize how its message sounds outside its main supporters, it risks losing moderates and independents who often decide national elections. Maher's closing message is direct: adjust to voters or prepare to face the same difficult results at the ballot box. And that brings us to the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, please press the like button and subscribe for more content like this.